Hey guys, it's Hannah. I did my book report on Raney by Clyde Egerton, and pretty much what this book is about a girl named Raney. It's a short, sweet story about a young Southern woman that gets married around 24 years old. She gets married to a guy named Charles Shepard, and uh, Raney is from North Carolina, but Charles is from Georgia. And they both come from very different families. Raney, her mother and father are, dang it, come on. Hey guys, it's Hannah. I did my book report on Raney. It's by Clyde Egerton. Raney is a short, sweet story about a young Southern woman that gets married. Raney's from North Carolina, and she gets married to a guy named Charles. Charles is from Georgia. He's the only child, and his parents are. His father has a doctorate degree, and he is a professor at a college, and his mother is a school teacher. Raney's family is a nice Southern family, very humble people. Her father owns a shop, and her mother is just a house mom. Raney does have siblings, but they're significantly younger than her. Well, Raney and Charles both met in college at a Christmas college event. Raney was singing, and afterwards, Charles loved her singing so much that he came up to her and started to talk to her. Well, since then, they ran into the library that Charles works at the college, and they said that one thing led to another, and the both of them ended up starting to date. Well, Charles asked Raney to marry him, and they were gonna get married. Well, the story really kicks off at Raney and Charles' um, reception, wedding reception practice, when Raney actually finds Charles outside drinking some liquor with one of his groomsmen. And Raney was appalled. She really had a conniption because Raney grew up in a very religious home where you don't drink alcohol because drinking alcohol and getting drunk is a sin, and it's just unacceptable. Well, on their honeymoon, Raney and Charles he had a special honeymoon planned where he had gotten them steaks, gotten her a dozen roses, and also had ordered some champagne, which Raney was not prepared for. She saw the champagne and she got kind of upset, and she let it go because she focused on the roses, but deep down she was not happy. Also, the rest of her honeymoon night did not go as she had pictured it or imagined it in her head, and for her became a really disturbing moment, something that she hoped that she could forget. As the story goes on, you see the different family dynamics between Raney and her family and how close-knitted they are and how involved her mother is with them versus Charles' family, where Charles' family, they're very hands-off, see each other every once in a while. They're not very, it's not the same close-knitness as it is with Raney's family. And that dynamic in very small ways, causes a few issues between Raney and Charles, causes some friction. Throughout the story, we learn that Charles actually serves in the military, and his best friend and war buddy is named Johnny, which Johnny is a colored man, and Raney was quite nervous about the idea of the fact that her husband's best friend was a colored man, because this was during the time when desegregation was just starting to happen, but hadn't quite fully come into effect, specifically where they lived. So they still had colored fountains, colored restaurants, colored restrooms, that kind of thing. So that mentality was something that Raney grew up in, and for her husband to have such an opposite opinion and believe that there should be equal rights between both colored and white, for her it was a very big difference, and it caused issues between her family and him, because he had very different ideas, and he brought those ideas around the family and to the family, and he spoke very openly about them. Ultimately, there was a breaking point between Raney and Charles' relationship right after her uncle Nate tried to commit suicide, and they had to go seek out counseling, because Charles wanted to try counseling, and Raney was very hesitant, and there was a lot of issues that she had with opening up. Ultimately, they did end up trying to work out their issues and work out their differences, and Raney went through some personal questions that she had to figure out about herself. And at the end of the story, they actually end up pregnant right after being married for a year, and they have a little boy named Ted, which is wonderful. But some of, from the social work perspective, some of the strengths that as a social worker that I would have really focused on in Raney is the fact that she is so strong-willed and she's so independent, and that she is very true to herself and true to who she is in God, and the fact that no matter what situation came up or what issue presented itself, she always went back to her roots. She went back to her core moral values, and she found her answers and her support from those moral values. And she never left them. Even when she battled with her own decision making, she always went back to her core. She defended her family from every standpoint and from every angle, to the point that I honestly think she should have been a little bit more open-minded towards her husband and his opinions, but she was very faithful to her family and to her faith. And I believe that is a wonderful strength quality in a person. It helped her overcome a lot of hard times. Looking at some of the important systems that were around her, definitely her family system and her church family system was extremely important. So much so that she built her marriage around those systems, which, I mean, in some people's opinion, you shouldn't do, because you and your spouse should be a priority, but those family and church systems and societal systems were so important that she filtered her views and her marriage through those systems. And those systems were extremely influential in how she felt about their marriage. One of the other theories that I thought was very evident was conflict theory. I thought that there was a lot of that going on, because Raney and Charles had such completely opposite, opposing views on everything, that Charles continuously tried to bring in new ideas and new thoughts and new ways of thinking to Raney, because that was really important, and he wanted her to think outside of what she has been raised to think, which I thought was wonderful. And he really tried to take out a lot of narrow-mindedness that she had and her family had, and it brought up a lot of good discussion. I mean, yes, it did bring up arguments, but it also brought in a lot of good discussion, that to the point where she actually started questioning things about herself, excuse me, and reevaluating who she is and where her beliefs come from, and asking questions. For the first time, she was really asking questions, and I thought that was wonderful. I honestly think that her culture and my culture are very similar and very different in multiple ways, other than the fact that I grew up in Hispanic culture and she grew up in a Caucasian culture. We both share a heavy religious background, and gender roles were both very important in both of our cultures and in the ways that we were raised, and I thought that was interesting. I do like the fact that she did ultimately let some freedom into her life, and even though she never lost her faith and she never lost the desire to continue to be faithful to God, she did try to understand Charles on a deeper level, which I thought was great. Ultimately, this book was nice. It was short, it was sweet, and it brought together a whole bunch of really good ideas, and I really was able to see a lot of social work in this book.